Hello, my dear students. I am Brajesh Kumar. Today I am going to teach you literature of the absurd. This lecture is going to be a bilingual lecture. I will explain the term in Hindi as well as in English. Dear students, before I begin, I would like to tell you the dictionary meaning of the term absurd. The dictionary meaning of the term absurd is something that is widely unreasonable or illogical. Students, many of us usually we feel in our day to day life this absurdity. हम में से कितने लोगों ने करीब 15 या 20 दिन पहले ये सोचा होगा कि हमको 21 दिन के लिए अपने अपने घरों में रहना पड़ेगा. Many of us might not have thought about this. Many of us might have had lots of plans. Many of us might have had lots of work to do. But see the condition. Now we are inside our houses. We cannot go out, and this is better for us. All those plans, all those works which we were supposed to do, they all have been postponed, and many of them perhaps we will never be able to do those works. So this is how we can feel this absurdity. This one is not the only example. You see, from morning till evening, every day, we encounter lots of such meaningless things in our life. For example, see, when you start your journey in the morning to go to your office, maybe to go to your college, or maybe to go to your university, or to any of those working places, but every time you do not reach to that place, there is no guarantee of that. It may be that when you reach to your university, to your utter amazement, you will find that the university itself is closed and you are not informed about that. What would be the condition of yours at that time? You may feel at that time this meaninglessness. There is third example which I would like to tell you here. Many of us, we think that God will come to save us. As this may be a very controversial thing to tell, but still, in order to make you understand, I am just telling you. Many of us, we try to appease different gods and goddesses, to those different kinds of deities, going in the temple, offering money, offering flowers, as well as lots of kind of other things to the priests, so that the priest can make a kind of prayer in our favor. But what happens ultimately? Many of us get the desired results, many of us do not get the desired results, and some others will get the results in between. I mean, the thing he has or she has supposed, he or she has got half or maybe quarter or in some different quantities, the result of that, and many of us even do not. So this absurd condition, or this absurdity, is very much individualistic also, and you must understand this. So this absurdity usually is depicted by some of the writers after World War II in the works of literature, especially in drama as well as in prose fiction, because of the reason that this cannot be expressed, this cannot be incorporated in other subjects. For example, in psychology, in sociology, in political science, or in normal sciences, biology, kind of physics, chemistry, etc. Because most of them, they talk about logic, they talk about reason and rationality. They do not talk about something that is irrational, something that is meaningless. But literature is the subject where this idea of meaninglessness, this idea of hollowness is given due importance. And because of the reason, you see, the characters of literature are not the usually normal people or normal common people. They have some or other kind of deviating traits in themselves, and that's why they become kind of the characters over there. Those are not the people who are supposed to be the logical, who are supposed to be the rational or very reasonable. So similarly, you will find that this voice of absurdity, this idea of absurdity, is given its importance in works of literature, especially in prose as well as in fiction, dear students. Now, we need to understand the background of this particular movement known as absurdism. See, this movement emerged in France after the horrors of World War II as a rebellion against essential beliefs and values of traditional culture and traditional literature. Dear students, this movement started in France. Many of the writers, I will tell you later, the names and works of those writers, they emerged, you know, in France, and they started writing a kind of literature which even before had never ever been written, because many of them they had seen and faced the horrors of the World War II, and their ideas in traditional beliefs, in essential beliefs, in traditional values or culture and civilization, which lots of people of good places they used to by that time. I mean, by before the World War II, kept on propagating in the common public. They kept on propagating lots of beliefs and values of a traditional culture. For example, the universal brotherhood. For example, humanity. But what happened in that World War II? Not to talk of first, already that had happened, but here in World War II, lakhs and lakhs of people had been killed. Holocaust had taken place. The people who were killing, they were not knowing whom they were killing. Many of them, they were very much disturbed. And they expressed this idea, remember in war poetry also, that they killed because they were afraid of that if they would not kill, the other party would kill them. So those, remember, essential beliefs, those values of a traditional culture and traditional literature had been shaken. People, they started looking towards these values and traditions with a doubt. And some of those assumptions I would like to tell you here. And one of them is human beings are fairly rational creatures who live in an at least partly intelligible universe. See, this idea people used to have before World War II. Many of them, I mean, this was very popular idea of a traditional society, that human beings are fairly rational creatures. A person who lives in the society is a rational creature. He or she does the things according to reason or logic, does not do anything that is not logical or that is not reasonable. See, but what happens? That you can well find those people who come to you to tell you the logic, the rationality, or reason that you must do this or that, they themselves, when you go deep in their lives, they themselves are involved in such immoral, corrupt practices, which would kind of shake your belief in these values. And then the next point is they are part of an ordered social structure. Who? Human beings are the part of an ordered social structure. They may be the part of this ordered social structure, but see, inside this structure, there are lots of fissures. For example, in Hindu society, you will see that there are gradations of people. There is a structure, but this gradation of the social, society and the divisions in castes have given a kind of disgusting thought to some of them, especially the foreburner of the society. They felt that they were kind of suppressed because of this particular social structure. So they, most of the times, feel this hollowness, feel this meaninglessness of being inside a social structure, because they feel that they are being suppressed because of this social structure. Women feel that they are being suppressed because of so many socio-religious laws, which most of the people they just keep on propagating throughout their life in their society and impose their laws in their families and societies. And the third thing, they may be capable of heroism and dignity even in defeat. Students, you can find this thing that in our society, heroism, valor, bravery, chivalry, these kinds of ideas are praised. If somebody is killed in a war, what happens? People they come and they praise, especially politicians, the people who have kind of social standing they come, or the people who are there in that particular village or in that particular area, they come in praise and they try to make a meaning out of that. But how many of them they send their own children to the frontiers to fight and save the country? And in that condition you will find that the condition of the deceased mother, sister, father, wife, you know, becomes meaningless. They feel this hollowness in their life, although other people who are around that family they keep on praising it, because of the reason that very few of them they have this power, they have this guts to send their own children to fight for the sake of the country. Then now we will see one of the statements of Albert Camus, which he has given in his very famous book The Myth of Sisyphus. And I quote, "We build our life on the hope for tomorrow. And tomorrow brings us closer to death and is the ultimate enemy. People live their lives as if they were not aware of the certainty of death. Once stripped of its common romanticism, the world is a foreign, strange, and inhuman place. True knowledge is impossible, and rationality and science cannot explain the world. Their stories ultimately end in meaningless abstractions, in metaphors. This is the absurd condition, the most harrowing of all." Dear students, here, unquote. Dear students, you can well see here how Albert Camus explains this particular idea of absurdity in this particular book. He says, see, we built our life on the hope for tomorrow. Students, he says that we always keep on trying hard in order to find a better future. But we forget that we are getting closer and closer to death. Even if we achieve our desired goals, even if we achieve what we wanted to achieve, even in that case, we cannot evade, we cannot kind of remove this fear of death from our life. In the time we become aware of this particular, fear of death in our life, we are stripped of our common romanticism. The word becomes foreign, strange, inhuman place for us. And so far as people just keep coming in, they keep on coming to you, telling to you about meaning, but you always feel that science and rationality cannot explain the word with perfection. Because once you have come closer to this idea of death, once you have come closer to this idea of meaninglessness in your life, all the things become horrible for you. Even their stories ultimately end in meaninglessness, abstractions, and you know this in metaphors. This is the absurd condition, the most harrowing of all. And then explaining this meaninglessness in the life of a common person, he gives us example of Sisyphus, a figure of Greek mythology who was condemned to repeat forever the same meaningless task of pushing a boulder up a mountain only to see it roll down. See, here is the figure of a person who is trying hard to somehow push a big boulder towards the top of a mountain. But what happens when once he reaches to the top of the mountain, the boulder rolls down and the man comes down and he again does the same activity. And this shows the absurd condition of this Greek figure Sisyphus. Albert Camus compares this absurd condition of Sisyphus to the absurd conditions of human beings in the world. Samuel Beckett, who was born in 1906 and died in 1989, was one of the most eminent and influential writers of this mode of writing, who has projected with the help of various characters of human society this irrationalism, this helplessness and absurdity of human life in many of his works, including Waiting for Godot, as well as the unnameable, Melodies, and many more. He has depicted this irrationalism, he has depicted this helplessness and absurdity of life in these works. And the best example before us is Waiting for Godot, where you will find that there are two trumps who are found in a waste place, fruitlessly and all but helplessly waiting for an unidentified person. These two Godots, they are waiting for an unidentified person. Even they do not know it perfectly that the person whom they are waiting would turn up. They are not sure about it, and that's why you will find that they have kind of this doubt also. And one of them remarks, nothing happens, nobody comes, nobody goes, it's awful. This shows the meaninglessness of the lives of those two characters who are on the stage in this particular drama, Waiting for Godot, written by Samuel Beckett. You can well understand that they are waiting for a person, the person, there is no guarantee that the person will come, but still they are waiting. And you see, that makes their condition, meaningless. Because most of the times we just keep on working harder and harder in our day-to-day life. But what happens? We are not sure that we will get the desired result. And you can well understand this by the example of the government, exams for the government jobs. Most of the times you will find that you appear in the exam in a particular year, but the result comes after 10 years, maybe after 8 years. And maybe by that time, all the joy which you might have enjoyed when you had got this job just after the exam, you already have lost that particular joy. So, and sometimes it happens that you are a competitor, you keep on appearing exam after exam, exam after exam, and you do not get the desired result. And sometimes it happens that when you get the desired result, after that, when you join, you feel that the thing which you already thought, that sense of joy that you already thought even before joining, that when once you join, you will get that particular joy, that particular bliss is missing out of that. So dear students, similarly we will find here that there are two people who are in a waste place, and they are there fruitlessly. There is no hope of the person whom they are waiting, and that has made their condition wretched, meaningless. And then literature of the absurd, the next slide is here. Like most works in this mode, the play is absurd in the double sense that it is grotesquely comic and also irrational and non-consequential. It is a parody not only of the traditional assumptions of Western culture, but of the conventions and generic forms of traditional drama, and even of its own inescapable participation in the dramatic medium. Dear students, here you will find that like most works in this mode, the play is absurd in the double sense because it is grotesquely comic and also irrational. Grotesquely comic because at times you will find that they're kind of doing such activities which create laughter. The people, the audiences, they keep on laughing. But this laughing is without any kind of result. This laughing is without any kind of instruction. This comedy is without any kind of instruction, which usually people always have this idea that comedy also teaches something, but here you will find that there is no teaching in this comedy. So it is grotesquely comic and also irrational and non-consequential, And this is irrational because there is no reason, no logic behind that, and non-consequential, and there is no consequence of all these activities. So it is a parody not only of the traditional assumptions of Western culture, which talk about rationality, which talks about meaning, full things, which talk about logic, etc., but of the conventions and generic forms of traditional drama. And it also makes fun of, the traditional drama and different, kind of dramatic techniques that usually are used, or traditions that usually are used by the traditional writers of drama. For example, in tragedy, for example, in the dramas are written by the traditional writers, kind of Shakespeare, Marlowe, and many of them, because you will find that they kind of uh, uphold a kind of tradition of drama writing, where you will find that a heroic figure, and before that heroic figure there is kind of big problem, he goes there, he solves the problem, he comes, and such kinds of meaningful things you will get there. But here there is nothing like that, so it makes fun of all those traditional conventions of drama, as well as makes fun of the traditional assumptions of Western culture that usually talks about, I told you, rationality, that talks about logical thinking. And now we need to see some of the common features of absurdist literature after kind of having a thorough study of this particular literary term. We need to see how this particular absurd condition is depicted in a work of literature. The absurdist literature is usually found with neither comedy nor nonsense, with unpredictable juxtapositions, because it is the study of human behavior under those circumstances that appear to be purposeless. Dear students, here you will find that there is a kind of comedy, but this comedy seems to be comedy that is purposeless. It does not give any kind of instruction, there is no teaching involved in it, and sometimes it is not fully comedy nor nonsense. Even the audiences, even the readers of such a drama, or the spectators of such a drama, they themselves are uncertainties, they themselves are not in the condition of finding out any meaning out of that, because you see those characters who are there shown on the stage, they do such kinds of activities which are meaningless, and with unpredictable juxtaposition you will find that totally contrary things are placed together, because it is study of human behavior. And why this meaninglessness is depicted, why this hollowness of the human life is depicted on the stage? See, because of the reason that this particular form of drama studies human behavior under those circumstances that usually appear to purposeless to individuals. And then the next feature of this particular literature is this: absurdist fiction imposes little judgment about characters of their actions. That task is left to the readers. Usually students will find that the writer of an absurdist fiction or a drama does not conclude the work, rather he leaves conclusion for the reader to derive according to their understanding. The moral of the story is generally not clear, because most of the things which are meaningless are depicted on the stage. So there is only one moral, and that is this, that it is without moral. And then the next feature, characters' realizations, if any, are often ambiguous in nature. Usually you will find that characters usually they realize something or other, but here it becomes very vague, it becomes very unclear what characters realize or what they do not realize, because many times they keep on doing the meaningless things on the stage. So for readers, for spectators, it becomes rather difficult to find out what they think. So that's why their realization remain unclear, remain ambiguous to the people. Absurdist work will not necessarily have a traditional plot structure, for example rising action, falling action, or climax, or starting, middle, end, etc. This kind of work, absurdist work, does not have this kind of plot. The conventional elements of fiction such as plot, characterization and development of the story tend to be usually absent from absurdist literature. The absurdist fiction is fiercely individualistic and almost exclusively focuses on exploring an individual's or a being's subjective feelings of its existence. Dear students, this is very important point for you, that an absurdist work, either literature, novel or a drama, is fiercely individualistic because it talks about individuals' feeling or experiences of hollowness, feelings of meaninglessness, because of the reason that most of the things which seem meaningless to one person may be full of meanings for another person. So to a great extent this kind of literature is individualistic because the characters, they do what they feel like. They depict usually the meaninglessness of their own life on the stage. But one thing is very much clear, that all of us, whether we people or those characters on the stage, most of us, I mean, we feel this meaninglessness in our life at one time or another time. Then some important absurdist works and their writers are here, and on the one side the names of the writers are given and their countries are given. On the other side we will find the works of those writers with the years of the publication. So the first one is Alfred Jarry, was a French person who wrote Oberoi. In English it is known as Obo the King. And then the next one is Franz Kafka, who wrote The Trial and Metamorphosis. And the next one is Albert Camus, French writer, who wrote The Myth of Sisyphus. Eugenio Ionesco, he wrote The Balsoparano. Samuel Beckett, he wrote, he was a French writer. He wrote Waiting for Godot, Endgame, Malondies, The Unnameable. And the next one is Thomas Pynchon. He was an American writer. He wrote We and Gravity Rainbow. Then the Harold Pinter, who wrote The Birthday Party, The Dumb Waiter, The Caretaker, and Edward Alibi, who was an American writer. He wrote The Jew Story, who is afraid of Virginia Woolf. And then the next one is Tom Stoppard, who was a British writer, who wrote Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead. And then the last one, Joseph Heller, who was an American writer and who wrote Catch 22. Dear students, now I am going to finish this lecture here on, and I hope that you have understood a lot of things about absurd literature. And I'm really very sorry that I have not used many sentences in Hindi, because once I started, I found it very difficult to kind of shift from one to another. So for that I apologize all of you, and I request you that if you have found my lecture fruitful, please like it, and thank you very much.